AZ once said he's committed terrible sins throughout his life, but was that all he did? What about the time he built a device to safeguard his brother and his descendants? The time he created the Tower of Mastery? Or when his knowledge saved an entire region from certain demise? What about his child? Okay, that last one might sound like a lie, but I promise you, there is quite a lot of evidence to support it. In order to answer these questions and more, we need to start 3,000 years ago. Without a warning, a neighboring country started a war with the Kalos region, which grew so ugly that the king was forced by his own soldiers to forfeit Floette to the horrors of the battlefield. Even AZ's own brother stood against him. It's said that he gathered a legion of greedy souls to take what they thought was rightfully theirs, but their plan never came to fruition. The night before this supposed raid, the brother went to speak with AZ for one last time, but what he saw before himself made his blood run cold. Thousands upon thousands of Pokemon were strapped to stones, having their life energy drained from their bodies, and in the center of it all stood AZ, arms outstretched, laughing to himself like he was just about to perform some sort of miracle. AZ's brother yelled out to the man he could barely recognize at this point, demanding an answer to the sickening sight before them both. AZ turned to meet his brother's eyes, and with an almost broken look in them, he yelled out the following: "What's wrong with bringing something you love back into this world? Without my beloved Pokemon, no other Pokemon have any meaning." With those words, he activated the weapon, reversing the flow of the stones. While they usually emit energy, they now absorbed it, transferring it straight into the ultimate machine. Through this, his Floette was revived, but AZ's brother saw none of that. He only saw the now limp bodies hanging on the stones used to power this sickening contraption. This brings us to another question that needs answering. What even gave AZ the idea to build a machine like this? Well, this masterpiece of machinery could have potentially been modeled after Floette's own energy manipulation abilities. As per Floette's Pokédex entry, we can learn about how it exchanges power with flowers through wavelengths of light, with each wavelength being specific to a Floette. This could also mean that AZ's Floette is the only one who could nowadays hold one of these black flowers, if they still even existed, of course, as the Floette who could do so in the past presumably died out when these rare flowers also did. But I'm getting off track here. The ultimate weapon's capabilities act in a similar manner to that of Floette's. Within the now broken Lysander labs, we can learn about how the weapon converts life energy into its purest form before transmitting it to others through either convection, conduction, or radiation. Key point being radiation here, which light waves, the form of energy that these Floette quite literally use to revive flowers, are a part of. But, you know, AZ wasn't done yet. He needed his revenge. He repurposed the device into a weapon of mass destruction, aiming it at both his enemies as well as his allies. And within seconds, a flash of light wiped out everyone who fought so hard to protect their loved one's freedom, to end the war. Disgusted by AZ's actions, Floette turned away, abandoning the now broken man who did everything in his power to save her. The weapon, however, not only cursed AZ with eternal life, but it also grew his stature to the one we know today, turning him into a giant that was exiled from his own kingdom. But AZ wasn't the only one who saw the wrong of his ways. His brother saw how this weapon ravaged the once flourishing Kalos, and thus decided to hide it away in hopes that no one should ever find it. During this, he presumably found an artifact that AZ must have made for him, in both hope that he would find it, and perhaps also as a way to atone for him abandoning his little brother. This artifact took on the form of a bronze beetle-shaped necklace, which we learn of in Pokemon X and Y, could be fitted around a person's arm. AZ's brother then gave the location of the weapon to his progeny, the only person he could trust to keep such a dark secret. AZ next traveled to the Galar region, a country close to Kalos, where he experienced the darkest day. Based on the records provided though, there's a good chance he actually had something to do with it, but we'll get back to that at the end of the video. Then he wandered. He traveled the world for 1,000 years, searching for Floette. But that was until a certain meteor shower occurred in both the Hoenn region as well as the location where I believe stands the modern-day Tower of Mastery. The evidence behind that theory comes from the historical records found inside of the Lumiose Museum. It was said that a shining stone which emitted great warmth was discovered here, mirroring the description of the meteorite from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. The same meteorite that throughout throughout the game's story turns into a Mega Stone. The reason I believe that the tower was built 2000 years ago also comes from one of the painting's descriptions, as it tells us that two strange stones were once found in the area, both of which are thought to have been the first Mega and Keystone. If these two stones were truly the first of their kind, then AZ must have discovered Mega Evolution here. Why? Well, AZ mentions building a structure called Ange around 2000 years ago, whose true purpose was to bond with Mega Floette, forming Ange Floette. But if AZ hasn't experienced Mega Evolution before this point in time, then Ange obviously wouldn't have been built in such a way. Since we also know that Lucario was the first Pokemon to Mega Evolve in the Kalos region, and Rayquaza the only other one Mega Evolved 1000 years later, then this is the most likely chain of events. AZ likely witnessed the first Mega Evolution firsthand, and using the original key in Mega Stone, a Lucario must have Mega Evolved before him, inspiring him to create a structure only Mega Floette could control. At the time, he didn't quite understand why this phenomenon occurred through the two meteorite fragments, but that's a topic we'll revisit later on in the video. For now though, let's focus on Ange itself. While its exact design remains open to interpretation, we know it was built as the opposite of the ultimate weapon, where the weapon drained life, Ange radiated it. It also functions inversely to the stones that once powered the ultimate weapon, as when activated, it emits Mega Energy, and when dormant, it absorbs it, storing it for future use. We're told it was built due to a powerful man requesting for its construction, all in order to safeguard the Kalos region. But safeguard it from what? Well, if this meteor shower truly did occur here, then it would have been likely that it was to safeguard its people from a similar disaster occurring again. And that mysterious, powerful man? Well, records show that AZ's brother's lineage ruled Kalos long after his departure to Galar, so it's possible that the reigning king of that era requested Ange's construction, and that AZ, once again seeking to atone for abandoning his brother and destroying his homeland a millennium earlier, granted that wish himself. That all leaves us with one big question. Who was the person who used the first key and Mega Stones? It's possible that AZ himself performed the world's first Mega Evolution, alongside his partner Lucario, whose goal then resonated with his own. What exactly was that shared goal? At first, I thought it might have been rogue Mega Evolution being caused by the meteorites crashing, but Legend ZA actually tells us that this only occurred recently, so that theory doesn't really hold up. Still, something had to trigger it, as it's likely that Mega Stones form from a powerful wish shared between trainer and Pokemon. I mean, we see this idea reinforced multiple times. For example, in Legend ZA, Zygarde's Pebble becomes its Mega Stone only when we're faced with the energy beam from Ange. And you already know the example from Oras, the meteorite transforming into the Mega Stone that, well, then Rayquaza later eats, but you get the point. And for now, if we assume that AZ was that first user, it would explain what came next. After witnessing Mega Evolution's destructive potential, he realized its power could easily rival his own ultimate weapon. Then, to prevent another tragedy, he built the Tower of Mastery, a monument designed to teach restraint and balance. Interestingly enough, the tower's interior also features distinct English-looking knights, which perhaps could be a subtle nod to AZ's short time spent in the Galar region. But what about the people that now guard the Tower of Mastery? Well, the current modern-day ones are known as Gurken and Korrina, who are also said to have come from a long line of Mega Evolution users, specifically the first Mega Evolution user, which in our case is AZ. Of course, our argument doesn't really hold a lot of weight if these three aren't shown to ever interact with one another, but that's the thing, they do. At the end of Pokemon ZA, after AZ's passing, we receive from him a letter alongside a Lucario that he says was given to him by a certain trainer in hopes that it would keep him safe. Upon further inspection, we can discover this person to be Korrina, who not only gave him one of her precious Lucario, but also did so in order to safeguard him from harm that AZ himself knew would befall him soon. The close relation is reciprocated by AZ too though, as he also leaves a request. He asks us to let her know that he fulfilled her wish, that no matter how futile he knew it would be, he kept her Lucario at his side until his final moments. He didn't even send it with us into the final clash. That's how much AZ stayed true to his words. The only kind of relationship that I could think of to portray their dynamic is that of a grandfather and a grandchild. But what of Gurken? Well, his relation to AZ isn't stated as explicitly as the one here, it's still there. In the Pokemon Adventures manga, we can actually see them standing side by side, which lets us see their physical similarities as well. To continue this, I would like to bring up a point I mentioned earlier, the one about the meteor shower in Hoenn. We learn in Pokemon ZA that AZ actually went there about 1,000 years ago to study the origins of Mega Evolution, the meteorites. Those who were most affected by these meteorites were the Draconids, and they too have a mention in relation to the Mega Evolution successors in the manga. Stephen Stone mentions having trained at the Tower of Mastery before, and when he asked the Draconid Elder about Gherkin, they actually let us know that Gherkin is an offspring from the Draconids living in other regions. But before I get into the implications of that, aren't the Draconids and their lore keepers a Hoenn-based tribe? Well, no actually. Their history is in reality extremely vast, and their actions connect pretty much every region with one another. However, it's a rather complicated piece of Pokemon lore, so I thought it'd be best if my good friend lorekeeper Toby explains to you all the Draconids' expansive past. He's also got a really interesting theory about the Draconids here in the Kalos region, but in order to understand any of that, we need to start from the beginning, from the time the Draconid people first started to record their divide.
2,000 years ago, a meteorite shower passed over the Hoenn region and seems to have bombarded the area that today we know as Meteor Falls. And the people that lived there, well, we now know them as the Draconids, lore keepers of the ancient Pokemon world. But at that point in time, Meteor Falls was their home. The raining down of these meteorites also resulted in the shaking of the Hoenn region and the awakening of Groudon and Kyogre in their primal states. When Groudon and Kyogre fight, the Hoenn region suffers. And so the Draconids not having a home and begging for salvation, they didn't wish upon Rayquaza. They didn't even worship Rayquaza at the time. Instead, they wished upon the many wishing stars passing in the night sky, perhaps the meteorites that had fallen on their home. There's the whole side theory about Jirachi passing in a Millennium Comet every 1,000 years and being a wish-granting Pokemon, so perhaps it was to Jirachi they wished. Either way, they prayed. They prayed for hope, and hope arrived in the form of Rayquaza, that descended 2,000 years ago for the first time and settled the fight between Groudon and Kyogre. At that point, Rayquaza became a sort of god, a point of worship to the Draconids, and the Draconids became nomadic, and their footprints can be seen all across the Pokemon world, but especially in the Japanese regions. But let's just start with Hoenn, because we know for sure that the Sky Pillar was built by them, and so its architecture and its paintings, wherever they else can be found, that's a good place to look. Also, it's just to the east of Pacifilog Town, where people in the town seem to know, well, an awful lot about the Latties and the Reggies, and of course are right next to the Sky Pillar. So it seems that perhaps the whole town of Pacifilog was built around people wanting to protect lore and protect these secrets. Again, just to the west, underwater, there are some Reggie chambers, and there's a special Braille code and messages from people that were scared of the Reggies and their power. So again, we have people scared about the power of legendary Pokemon, sealing them away to protect the Hoenn region. This is probably the Draconids. Similar paintings can be found in the cave known as Granite Cave in Dewford Town, just the other side of the bit of the ocean that goes past the Reggie Chambers. So again, tying it all together, it just makes an awful lot of sense that they're the same people. In that cave, one of the most special Pokemon we can find is Nosepass, a Pokemon that is used for wayfaring, for sea travel. It always points north. And if you're living in the Japanese country of the Pokemon world, then north is the Sinnoh region. And at the northmost point, the Reggie Temple to Regigigas. Not only that, but the Reggie Temple of Snowpoint seems to predate the Diamond and Pearl clan that were there at the time of Hisui. Perhaps it dates back to the time of the original Celestica people, which may well be around 2,000 years ago. And who are the Celestica people? Well, it's hard to say, but they also showed up on the scene around 2,000 to 1,000 years prior to the events of Pokemon Legends ZA. Not only that, modern day, the area that is now known as Celestic Town, from where it gets its name, is home to Cynthia. Cynthia is absolutely fascinated with Pokemon lore, and her village seems to have a lot of secrets and history and cave paintings to do with the legends of that particular region. Drasna, the Kalos Elite Four member, is also thought to have come from a sort of dragon-worshipping village, a little ancient culture in the heart of the Sinnoh region, so it seems that she's also part of this same lineage. But what's any of this got to do with the Draconids? Well, there are other dragon clans in the world of Pokemon. First of all, in the Johto region, the Embedded Tower, where you can find Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, it bears the same hallmarks of the Sky Pillar, the same architectural design. On top of that, there's a particular hiker who informs you about all of this stuff, and the same hiker seems to appear if you take an Arceus to the ruins of Alph before the Sinjo Ruins event. The Sinjo Ruins is placed perfectly between the Johto Johto and Sinnoh region, a coming together of two different cultures, those of the Sinnoh region and the Solaceon ruins, and those of the Johto region and the ruins of Alph. The ruins of Alph have depictions to Hoenn, which connects us to Ecruteak City and the lore keepers that live there in the Kimono Girls. They all use evolutions. Cynthia also shows up in the Sinjoh ruins, and she also has an evolution. She has a Glaceon. Maybe it's connected, maybe not. What we do know for certain, though, is that the Mystery Stage, the area built to worship Arceus, well, it was built by people who danced to commune with legendary Pokemon. That's the Kimono Girls. So you can really see how all these different bits of culture tie together. Lorekeepers, ancient ruins and cave paintings, messages to the people of today about the legends of the ancient past. There's also the Alola region, which again, based on like the Pokemon geography matching the real world geography, is Hawaii, between the Unova region and, of course, Sinnoh. And out there, we see the Sea Folk people. They have a very similar culture to Pacific Town. They're kind of this on-the-water village of lore-interested people. And not only that, they're on the one island of Alola where there are murals and sites to the local deities. Moving even further afield to the Unova region, we have the Dragon Spiral Tower, another tower designed with architectural traits that we can see in both the Sky Pillar and the Spear Pillar coming together to worship the local dragon deities. It really seems to be the case that the Draconids and their culture expanded all across the Pokemon world. There's even modern-day Kalos, where, and this bit is entirely speculation from me, I can't help but wonder if Quasartico is not the sort of modern branch, a tower, Rayquaza, Quasartico, that is a home of information that would be important to the lore of the Pokemon world. And Vinny looks like, well, Mega Rayquaza in his design. So I can't help but wonder if perhaps this isn't a modern branch, the modern evolution of Draconid culture across the Pokemon world. We know that Draconids appeared in the Kalos region in ancient times because the Tower of Mastery, where Mega Evolution was first discovered, features a spiral-like design. Obviously a reference to the double helix spiral of Mega Evolution, but also perhaps to the spiral nature of Zinnia's anklet that she uses to Mega Evolve. There is something about the spiral shape, a shape that Rayquaza could itself achieve. So it really is the case that the Draconid culture moved out after the destruction of Meteor Falls 2,000 years ago, passing down the legends and mythos of the Pokemon world to protect its citizens from the local deities.
Remember how I talked about how AZ's offspring are the successor to the Tower of Mastery? Well, if we combine the part in the manga, and also the lore that Toby just talked about, it would mean that AZ had an offspring with a Draconid from the Kalos region, which, to be honest, isn't as strange as it first seems. They're both interested in the world's lore and the history behind legendary Pokemon, which, by the way, would also explain why AZ met Xerneas in Yveltal. It's pretty likely that the Kalosian Draconids took him along while they went out to see these mythological creatures and study them. His connection to their Hoenn counterparts is also undeniable, and it would explain why the elders there speak so fondly of him. But if that hasn't convinced you yet, then here is my final argument. AZ has lived for over 3,000 years. If this man didn't get any action whatsoever, then I have absolutely zero chance. AZ's connection to the Draconids in Hoenn is talked about in their local mythology, and it's likely that he was also introduced to them there by the clan from Kalos. We don't know the exact date of his arrival, but his first recorded appearance was during the second meteor shower around 1,000 years ago. And yes, I said second one, the Hoenn region has a severe problem with meteor showers. It was during this time that a giant meteorite struck a place in the sea that would nowadays be known as Zootopolis City. This place also holds the cavern in which both the powers of Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon were sealed after Rayquaza defeated them 1,000 years prior to this time. Thus, the two started to brawl once more, but with their full powers restored and the newly uncovered primal energy that now saturated the ground, their strength was far beyond anything they have ever had access to before. Once again, the Draconids prayed for Rayquaza to save them, and it responded. Arriving from the heavens, Rayquaza was defeated. The Draconids looked upon their deity in horror, but before they could respond to these events, their lorekeeper stepped forward, and using the knowledge given to them by AZ, they wished for Rayquaza to Mega Evolve. With its newfound power, it defeated the two primal beings, sealing their powers away once more inside the Cave of Origin. AZ also planted a tree in front of this very cavern, which later on, during the events of the mainline games, we can actually see the same flower that Eternal Floette holds, the one that was said to have died out. With that in mind, the only possible explanation is that it was planted by Floette herself. After seeing AZ's shifting mindset, she realized that the man who was her trainer from before the Great War 3,000 years ago was finally returning. After Rayquaza's victory, the Draconids built the Sky Pillar in its honor, using it to also record the knowledge AZ gave them, with one line in particular being recorded word for word. It is the Delta, born of the great disturbances in this world. Delta is a Greek symbol meaning change, and while at first you might think he meant that Rayquaza's Mega Evolution was caused by his ultimate weapon, I don't think that's quite right. He talks about disturbances, not a disturbance, which likely means that other things occurred alongside his ultimate weapon's use. And there was actually an event just like he describes, the Darkest Day. It occurred a little time after the war was forcibly brought to a close, and if AZ was truly also there, then he couldn't have just been a bystander. What's rather interesting about the culprit behind the second disaster, Eternatus, is the reasoning behind his actions. After it fell to the ground in the form of a meteorite 20,000 years ago, it stayed dormant until the ultimate weapon fired, whereafter it awoke due to a severe lack of energy. Its attempt to stay alive was this disaster. It drained all of Galar's energy as a sort of Hail Mary move. This, of course, only worked partially, but it still brings up an interesting point. Why was this so sudden? Why would it need so much energy when it hasn't needed it before this point in time? Well, what's if AZ knew more than he let on? What's if the neighboring country that Kalos fought with was Galar? What's if the reason behind this conflict was the meteor that Eternatus resided within? The one that AZ could have used to power all of his inventions? I mean, their past tensions are already quite evident, as it's stated in the Lumious Museum that the past relations between Galar and Kalos weren't of the positive kind, but that's a theory for another video. And if you don't want to miss that, then consider subscribing to the channel.